And speaking of cocksuckers, Hell's Kitchen, New York City, home of crackheads, crack dealers, Euro tourists, and yes, many, many muscle-bound twinks. Home also to the Port Authority bus terminal, one of the biggest shitholes in the world. And I have been all over the developing world. So when I say that it is one of the biggest shitholes in the world, it is one of the biggest shitholes in the world. It is really embarrassing that New York City, the biggest transportation hub on the planet, has mass transit facilities that resemble conditions in developing nations. And for those of you who aren't of the New York area, again, a very New York-centric show today. I'm talking LBI. I'm talking Wall Street. I'm talking fucking homeless guys jacking off in the Port Authority. Allow me to give you sort of an oral tour of some of the commuter hubs in the area. Actually, oral tours sound great. I even think about it. There should be oral tours. There should be like they have, you could do like a bus tour or a ferry tour or whatever. They should have an oral tour where you get on a bus and it's a tour bus and they drive you around and there's someone up front with a loudspeaker pointing out the sights, and the entire time that the tour is going on, some chick sucks your cock. It's an oral tour. It'd be great. Fucking sell out in seconds. It'd be like getting a table at Rayo's. You'd never be able to. You'd never get on. But back to our oral tour here. The Port Authority bus terminal is located in Hell's Kitchen, which is right next to Times Square. So the neighborhood is very heavily policed. And of course, like I said, it's home to those listed above. We have our Euro tourists. We have our crackheads, our drug dealers, our homeless guys, our homosexuals, because it's Hell's Kitchen adjacent. A real smorgasbord of humanity here. The cops are really just there to prevent terrorism and violent crime. So for the most part, everything else goes. Like the other day, I was walking through the neighborhood, and I was offered drugs on both my way to and from the bus terminal. I was offered Adderall one morning as well, which is actually a pretty good strategy if you think about it, because a lot of white-collar commuters go through the bus terminal, and if you went to happy hour on Thursday, then you're probably going to need a pick-me-up on Friday morning, and since it's not the 1980s, office cocaine use is no longer considered acceptable, which is kind of bullshit to me. Or you can have a cup of coffee. That's a stimulant. Caffeine's a drug. Okay, you could take Adderall at work. That's pretty much just prescription meth. Oh, but God forbid you do a couple lines of blow off your desk. All of a sudden, you're a piece of shit and an addict, and you're fired, and you're an embarrassment to your family, and never work in this goddamn town again. But I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, the poor guy who tried to sell me Adderall, his business is probably suffering horribly with everybody working from home. So it's just it was very sad to see another small business venture ravaged by COVID, as so many others in the area have. But seriously, unless you've lived it, it's almost impossible to believe what the neighborhood around the New York Port Authority bus terminal is like. Before you even step outside of the terminal, by the way, you encounter these homeless guys walking around like fucking zombies. And I mean it, they're legitimately dangerous, usually to each other. Usually. But they are known to cut a motherfucker. Like, we've had rashes of homeless guys slashing people in the city. It feels like it happens every year. There's just like a burst of news reports like, oh yeah, some guy got fucking slashed. Oh yeah, there's some guy slashing people. And what the homeless guys inside the building do is they hover around the departures board and they offer to help tourists find their bus. And then once they've done that, they demand payment for their service, and they get very, very fucking testy if you don't. Like, if they know you're local and you don't need help, they might pitch it and be like, hey man, need a hand, and you're just like, hey, fuck off. Then they won't bother you because they know that you know. But if you look if you're carrying a rolling suitcase and you look confused looking up at the board, they will absolutely harass the fuck out of you the entire time. And they try to make you feel bad. Like, I'm just trying to make a buck here, man. It's like, oh, really? Is that it? This is your business strategy? Probably tax-free, though. So that's good. Now, mind you, this is all before you've stepped outside into the street surrounding the Port Authority. And that's where the real dangerous ones are. Because there are usually like 6 cops standing right outside the door. Because if there weren't, then all of the guys who are on PCP or have serious mental disorders, every one of them would be inside the bus terminal taking a shit in the corner, or wherever the fuck they shit. But luckily, the Port Authority cops kind of just sit out there and stand vigil, and they keep the guys out of the physical building, but they hang out under the canopy on the sidewalk there to stay away from the elements, and they hover and they walk around in a loop, just like they hurl profanity. They remind me of non-player characters from an arcade game. Like if you ever play, like the Simpsons game or fucking Streets of Rage or whatever, just one of those games where you're just walking in a straight line and you have these characters who are walking in loops around you, and if they get in your path, you have to engage with them, or they touch you and you lose life points, and you do one of those like things and your meter goes down. One of them must have caused some kind of trouble in a bodega last week, because there was a gang of homeboys. Like I don't, not to disparage young men of color, but I mean these guys were straight out of a fucking Chappelle Show sketch. They were chasing him out of a bodega, and they were following him up the street, announcing that they were going to, quote, beat his ass. So at least a little entertainment on the walk home from work. But attached to the bus terminal is a subway station and an underground passageway that you can take to get to the Times Square subway station. So there's a subway station attached directly to the Port Authority, and then there's an underground walkway that goes about 3 blocks or so that is attached to the Times Square subway station. So the Port Authority bus terminal is located. It's sandwiched right between Hell's Kitchen and Times Square. Basically, it might technically be in Hell's Kitchen. I'm not sure, but the walkway underneath that connects the two. This is where you may remember hearing about an ISIS-inspired terrorist accidentally blowing up his own dick with a pipe bomb right before Christmas a few years ago. He detonated it during rush hour. But once you get to the Times Square subway platform, you can also treat yourself, if you're in New York City, to a glimpse of the bench on which a large black man recently got his salad tossed in a viral video. And I can tell you that it was definitely a recent salad tossing, because the guy that was getting his ass eaten, after he got up off of his friend's face, and yes, before you ask, that's the style in which they were doing it. They were face-sitting on a wooden bench in the Times Square subway station. Once he got up, the gentleman who was rimming him went ahead and put his COVID mask back on. And if someone reminds me, I will pop that video into the comments section below, because while it is absolutely hilarious and at least somewhat comforting that they were at least being safe enough to wear masks, it's also indicative of the subway system as a whole. Because when you go down there, you are literally, I don't know if you've ridden, say, the metro in Europe or whatever. Like I rode around on the system in Milan when I was over there a couple summers ago for my buddy's wedding, and clean and perfect It's not a bunch of fucking shitheads. Nobody's jerking off or taking a shit. It runs on time. The timers, everything is just good. You just gotta, be careful getting fucking pickpocketed. I was wearing a fucking one of those pussy fucking Euro traveling things under my shirt because I was afraid of getting robbed because I, saw Euro Trip one too many times. But New York City, you go down to take the subway, and aside from a couple of like the really nice news stations, you're underground with rats. You got schizophrenics who are down there making a game of shoving people in front of subway cars. And I'm serious, like you have to pay attention to where you're standing down there. You have to stand as far away from the edge of the platform as possible because it's become so commonplace. Like I mentioned before, these slashings, but it's also become commonplace for homeless guys to just get a running start and shove people in front of moving trains. And of course, fucking stupid de Blasio is like, oh, it'll be a good idea. I'll put a bunch of, we'll take up floors in luxury hotels in the neighborhood, and we'll put homeless guys in there, and we'll use them as halfway houses. And we'll plug that right into the biggest tourist hub in the city. Fucking brilliant. So this has been the result of that policy. What else? It's quite common for men to masturbate on crowded subway cars, so you got to be on the lookout for that as well. And I don't mean like literally. It's not like some guy with his hand down his pants fucking grabbing his balls. I mean literally men taking their erect penises out of their pants and stroking them to completion on the subway. It is also common knowledge among New Yorkers that if there's an empty car on a crowded train, it's because someone has defecated in it and it has yet to be cleaned or sanitized. It means that car is empty because someone has just taken a huge shit in the middle of the floor and no one's cleaned it up yet. And everyone has a story, it seems, if you commute on the subway often enough, which I'm lucky enough not to. I just use it when I have to get somewhere out of the way. But if you talk to people who commute on the subway, they all have a story about accidentally getting onto an empty subway car, thinking they just fucking scored, and realizing that they have stepped into a subway car where a homeless man has just voided his bowels all over the floor. So perhaps you get on the subway and you take a little ride down to 34th Street, Penn Station. Now, you could take a stroll over to 33rd, take the PATH train to Hoboken Terminal, maybe you grab an NJ Transit train to Secaucus. Those, by the way, Hoboken Terminal and Secaucus, the only two well-kept transit stations in the New York City hub, as it were, right? Because if the yuppie douchebags from Hoboken are good for anything, is that they can keep shit nice and clean. Hoboken might be a town full of assholes, but it is a very clean, well-kept town full of assholes. And Secaucus, the facility, is sort of a relatively new. I think they built it when I was in college. It's sort of a monolith. Just it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. So it's kind of tough for a PCP fueled homeless population to make their way to. I don't even know how they would get there. They'd have to actually buy a fucking train ticket because you can't get there without it. But let's just say instead of doing that, after weaving your way between the sleeping homeless and the puddles of urine that line the path from the subway to the train terminal at Penn Station, let's say you decided to get a train to Newark Penn Station. And yes, there are two Penn stations in like a 5-mile fucking range of each other, which is very stupid and very confusing. But say you do that and you get off the train at Newark. Well, here you will find what I believe to be the worst of our transit spots. Newark Penn Station is the shithole to end all shitholes. It has the same amount of homeless guys cleaning the scabs from their assholes in the bathroom stalls that New York Penn Station has, but it's smaller, so they're in a more concentrated area. And it has the same kind of of threatening train platform that subway stations have in the city, except instead of the fucking 7 train moving at a relatively plodding pace through the station, there's an Amtrak Acela Express that fucking whips through at light speed. And on top of all of that, there are fewer police officers there than anywhere else in the diaspora of transit hubs that make up the port of New York and New Jersey. So I'm very, very curious to see how all of this turns out, because the new World Trade Center station has been turned into a luxury mall. So they do a very good job down there of keeping the riffraff out, and I personally think that it's essential to New York City's place as one of the most important cities on the planet. If we're going to act like that, and if we're going to be that, then we should have our visitors arriving to a nice, welcoming station and not being threatened by a guy with an angel dust habit and a collection of razor blades. I don't think that's a very difficult ceiling to reach, if we're being totally honest, right? We're not doing ourselves any favor with, we should, at this point in the Port Authority, when you step off the bus, you should be greeted by a big sign that says, "Welcome to New York." You'll get stabbed, maybe. So yeah, Port Authority renovation supposedly coming, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they can keep clearing the homeless and the scum and the hypodermics and the masturbators and the defecators out of there, because it really is. It's fucking awful. It is. It's disgusting, and it's shitty, and it's gross, and I know we have a progressive mayor De Blasio. I figured the homeless would all be living in luxury fucking high rises by now and doing great, but who the fuck knows?